Hi, everybody. My name is Lydia McVeigh. I am the Executive Director of the Virginia Club of New York. This is actually my inaugural event as Executive Director. I'm a class of 2021 grad from the College of Arts and Sciences. So it's my pleasure to share this event with you guys and Who's in Entrepreneurship. Just a few housekeeping items. I would ask that everyone, you are free to turn your camera on or keep it off, but I would ask that everyone stay on mute. We're going to have some Q&A at the end. You're welcome to unmute during that, but just so we can have full attention to our speaker today, Shannon. And you're also welcome to drop any questions, comments in the chat box at any time during the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Allison and Anthony. They're the co-chairs of our Who's in Entrepreneurship community of interest, and they're going to introduce our speaker.
Awesome. Thank you, Lydia. And very happy to have you also for your first event with the Virginia Club. Very happy that it's the Who's in Entrepreneurship event, not going to lie. I'm Allison. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming. If you don't know me yet, Allison Geller. I'm co-chair of Who's in Entrepreneurship along with Anthony Simasek. So very happy to have a great crowd for this event. This is the second of two virtual events that we've done focused on mental health for entrepreneurs. I think it's a really great topic and something that we'd heard a lot of demand for, and I think something that we can all relate to no matter what stage we are in our entrepreneurial journey, what we're doing. It's something that I think is just very relevant to all of us. So we're very thrilled to find Dr. Shannon Reece to come here joining us virtually from Naples, Florida. Shannon has a really interesting background. She is both a master's and PhD from UVA in sports psychology. And she was actually just telling us she started out her coaching business actually working with women entrepreneurs, and then ended up kind of going full-time working with golfers, both amateur and professional, on refining their game and creating a, what we are kind of calling a winning mindset, and really thinking through those mental strategies that really dictate our success and how we feel about what we're doing, which is something that I find personally really interesting. And I hope that all of you will too, and how we can kind of take those lessons from the course and kind of apply them to our businesses. So as an entrepreneur herself, Shannon definitely has a lot of really great experience and lessons, I think, to share with us. So you should have received a handout that Shannon had us send out. Let me know, you can chat, any of us, if you didn't, but just something that you can kind of use to follow along. We will have a bit of time at the end for Q&A. So as Lydia said, feel free to drop your questions into the chat, or you can save them up and ask them later. And I think that is all I really had to say. So I definitely want to leave all the time really to Shannon. So I will go ahead and give her the floor. Thank you so much, Shannon, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor. Super excited to be surrounded by so many fellow alums. So this is great. Any current students here also in this group? Maybe? Nope.
Any students? We love getting students, but maybe they're shy.
No worries. All right. So I have a ton to share with you this evening. So let me dive right in. I'm really excited about the topic. I like to say that performance is performance, no matter what arena you find yourself playing in. And so when you think about the mental side of the proverbial game, it's just as important to the entrepreneur as it is to the elite athlete. Yet in my experience back when I started my coaching business, I found that there were a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns around what constitutes a great mindset, and is it something that I really need to invest in order to succeed in business? And yet nowadays it seems to be kind of a common thread. People are talking about mindset challenges on a regular basis. So you're going to learn about six principles for a winning entrepreneurial mindset. And I've drawn this from a training that I actually designed for my golf clients. But it is directly applicable to business. And so I've modified it to fit our focus this evening, and I'm excited to share it with you. So I want you to consider, though, how you can apply what I talk with you about, what we discuss, even in the Q&A, to your life and not just your business. Why, you might ask? Just as when I'm working with my golf clients, the more that you take the principles around operating with a winning mindset and you apply them globally to your life, the better the impact they're going to have on the individual parts of your life. So I want you to really kind of think about embracing this as a holistic approach to every performance arena: friends, family, work, leisure, sports activities, etc. Because when you cultivate the habits to become a great thought leader for yourself personally, the greater the impact that you're going to have as a thought leader beyond yourself and even beyond your business. So let's dive right in here. One of the hardest things, I think, when it comes to the mental side of the game is literally just staying on top of your thoughts, right? So we're really talking about taking a very disciplined approach and almost a meta approach to thinking about how you think about things. And that's where things get difficult, is just really staying on top of how you think moment by moment throughout your day as you are performing in your business. So the mental side of the game is not something, I think this is a big misconception. It's not something that you're ever going to put on autopilot. You will never study it enough, practice it enough that you can just expect it to happen on its own. Taking a strong mental approach to business means that you are going to consistently march your thoughts through systematic processes that keep you focused on the things that are most important to your business success. By doing that, you make yourself less vulnerable to getting sucked into the stuff that just doesn't matter. And there's a heck of a lot that's pulling your attention strings on a regular basis in the business arena from all sides. And so it's hard sometimes to cut through the noise. But taking a meaningful approach to the mental side of your business performance is going to help you clear a lot of that clutter. And the great news is that you are the director of your thoughts, you're the author of your thoughts, so you can absolutely do that. And it's a two-pronged approach, right? We have to be self-aware first in order for us to be able to self-manage. And so you need to think about the process that way. So my challenge, if you choose to accept it this evening, is to walk away from this seminar having selected at least one thing that you're going to start actively and consistently applying from the 6 principles that I'm going to share with you. So instead of trying to do all the things, I'm going to challenge you to focus on one place to start. So those 6 principles are operating with healthy expectations, listening to a positive inner coach, focusing on the controllables, maintaining unshakable confidence, developing a love affair with learning from failure, and lastly, setting a winning game plan. And I've created a simple handout, which hopefully you guys were able to print, and so you guys can follow along with where I go. So let's dive into pillar number 1, which really sets the stage for your success by teaching you how to operate with healthy expectations. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients who tell me that one of the biggest problems that they face is that they consistently set their expectations way too high, right? And that's where all the pressure comes from. In reality, it's simply that they're setting their expectations on the wrong thing. What I mean is that they're focused on measuring their success primarily by the finish line or specific outcomes, rather than really looking at the things that help contribute to good finishes. Same thing happens out on the golf course. We get focused on our score instead of the things that contribute to good shot making. So to succeed in business and to reach your big golf goals, you've got to make sure that you put in the time, the effort, and the energy into the things that actually help you perform at your best moment by moment. And that list is fairly short and simple. But if you tend to focus on, chase, worry about, or obsess about where you want your business to go, or the gap between where you are and where you would like your business to be, that's going to be very distracting, and it's going to bring with it a lot of stress and anxiety. So in golf, if you set your expectations on posting a good score, you lose sight of what you need to do in preparation for each shot to actually produce a good shot that cumulatively leads to a good score. In business, if you're constantly looking, like I said, at that gap between where you are and where you want to be, you probably won't be paying attention to mapping out a systematic game plan of baby steps, incremental mini wins that are going to move you in the direction that you actually want to go. So you want to know what my focus needs to be each and every day, one step at a time. So part of the problem with focusing on the future is that it's nebulous and it distracts us from being able to put 100% of our best into the present tasks before us. Same thing happens if you get bogged down in the past. You start replaying and regurgitating all the mistakes that you've made in the past. Again, that limits your ability to focus effectively in the present and do your best there. So you've heard the saying, plan your work and work your plan. And it's important to know where you want to go. But as I mentioned, you also want to make sure that you figure out the systematic steps that get you to that ultimate finish line, because your power only resides in the present. That's where you're seated in the power seat of your game, because that's the only part of your reality that you can actually control. The future is not something you have direct control over, and we can't change the past. So that leaves us the present. So therefore, setting your expectations around the present process side of your business activities is essential to your success. And I want to give you a key action that will help you with this. So a key process-centered focus that you can commit to every day is to reach for your best with every task. Okay? The fun ones, the boring ones, and everything in between. Because there are a lot of things that we have to do as business owners that aren't necessarily fun, aren't necessarily glamorous, and in our opinion, don't always move the needle in the direction that we want it to go. But they're still important, and they're still worth doing to the very best of your ability. Because again, we're looking at the cumulative effect of you approaching your business with particular standards of excellence across the board, not just the bright and shiny fun things, okay? So whether you're completing an expense spreadsheet, coming up with content for your next social media campaign, or conducting a sales call, you want to focus on bringing your best to it. That means your best focus, your best attitude, and the best quality that you can give. And that doesn't mean that you need to be an expert at all the things, but that you need to pursue excellence in the things that you're actively doing. So avoid going through the motions or half-assing the job, pardon my language. Train yourself to show up for the little things as exceptionally as you do for the big ones. That's what it means to set healthy expectations. Moving on to pillar number two. Pillar number two is about listening to a positive inner coach. There is so much power that you have to access when it comes to your mind, and it's something that you don't want to waste by taking a passive approach to it. And there is a voice that is constantly talking inside of your head during your waking hours. Sometimes that little voice can be loud and bossy. And you want to make sure that, again, you are not a passive bystander to that internal dialogue, but you're an active director of it. So I refer to that voice inside your head as your inner coach. And there are two sides to the inner coach. You have a critic's voice and you have a scholar's voice. And I'm sure just by the nature of how I define those two different sides, that you know which one adds to your business success and which one diminishes it. Because of our natural hardwiring, the voice that tends to be the default is the critic's voice. You've heard the saying, we're our own worst critics. Well, it's true, and it's really easy to tear ourselves down from time to time, and sometimes we don't see that as being problematic. We think we're being constructive or we're being realistic, practical. Well, there's no value in tearing yourself down. There's only value in focusing on how can I double down on the things that I'm doing well and celebrate more of those. And the only way that you're going to have that kind of outlook is if you hand the mic in your head to the scholar's voice. So when you're deferring to the critic, good is never good enough. And that's a very defeating way to go about your daily operations in business. In contrast, that scholar's voice reflects a more objective and constructive assessment of how you're doing, okay? Moment by moment, task by task. It points out the things that you're doing that are actually worth repeating. And those are the only things that you want to really be mindful of as you go forward, because belaboring the mistakes that you've made can tend to create negative self-fulfilling prophecies and put you into a position where you repeat those mistakes. Okay, it's kind of like operating with the difference between a list of to-dos and a list of to-don'ts. And if you're a golfer or been in any sport, you know that sometimes there can be a battle inside your head of do this, do this, do this, but don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. All right. And so again, we're trying to eliminate the clutter. We're trying to streamline how you think and give you the opportunity to really lead with your thoughts for you. Self-leadership is very, very important. So we know simplistically that negativity produces poor results, whereas positivity and gratitude lead to the type of mindset that produces more success. There are two big trigger thoughts that I want to talk about with this pillar. Those two trigger thoughts are should and can't. Okay. When you think about how easily either of those words can pop into your head or out of your mouth, you might be thinking, well, they can't be that bad, really, right? Well, yes, they can. Both of those words do a lot to inflame your negative emotions and blow your perspective out of proportion. And that can happen in a split second. And so you want to be sensitive to your use of should and can't, because the more that you repeat them, the greater the negative impact they will have. So let's talk specifically about the impact of the shoulds. When you think about how you speak to yourself, every time you use the word should, that's really the voice of your ego doing the talking. And your ego, it operates in two separate realms. There's the overzealous side of your ego, which tends to cause you to entertain too much risk, which is not necessarily good in business. The opposite end of your ego is the protective side, and that puts you in a position to play it too safe, right? You're focused on how to avoid messing up, and that's a very defensive, fear-situated mindset to be operating with. So either end of those spectrums, you're going to be prone to making poor decisions. So if your inner conversation has ever sounded like, you know, I should be able to close this deal, or other people are succeeding with this strategy, so I should be able to figure this out. This is basically a negative and judgmental conversation that's going on in your head, and it's not going to facilitate good results. What it will do is make you more vulnerable to self-doubt, uncertainty about your decisions, and other things that aren't going to contribute to your business success. So I will often tell my clients, make a point to avoid shoulding all over yourself. And I didn't swear there, okay? Similarly, the can'ts can take over when you've thought or voiced them over and over again in reference to a particularly challenging task. The more you repeat a can't statement, the more of a reality it can become in your business. So when you've spent months or even years using can't talk about a particular challenge that you're facing, it becomes that negative self-fulfilling prophecy. So what you spend the most time thinking about becomes your reality. And that's how business owners get stuck and bogged down in fear. These two powerful words, should and can't, can have such a debilitating impact on your performance, whether you use them a little bit or a lot. Therefore, you really want to make sure that you neutralize them quickly. And you can do that by engaging the power of your scholar's voice. And I'm going to give you a very simple solution to neutralize those words. So all you have to do is replace I should and I can't with I can and I will, right? So instead of I should, I can. Instead of I can't, I will, right? It frames the situation quite differently in your mind, and it puts you, again, back in a position of empowerment. The words can and will redirect your attention to the solutions instead of the problem. They engage your thoughts in how to leverage your best strengths over trying to figure out how to fix your weaknesses. And the more persistent you are in purposefully using those thoughts, again, deferring to the scholar's voice in your head on purpose, the more you're going to believe that you can and you will the next time you're faced with that challenge. So I hope that makes sense. All right, pillar number 3 is focusing on the controllables. So performance is a very simple equation. Here's how I want you to think about it. Performance equals your ability as an entrepreneur, okay, minus something called interference. Interference is the noise that clutters your mind, okay? It is what makes it difficult for you to mentally and physically operate at your best. And there are 2 forms of interference. There's internal interference and there's external interference. So internal interference includes things like being afraid to make a mistake or recalling errors that you've made in the past, worrying about embarrassing yourself or what other people might think about you. That's internal interference. If you've ever heard about imposter syndrome, that's a version of internal interference. External interference includes things like a negative review from a customer or undesirable social media comments on one of your posts, unsolicited advice from family and friends. Anybody ever gotten that? I have. Or conflicting messages from experts you're following, right? As business owners, we're trying to learn as much as we can, as quickly as we can, and they're experts all over the internet, far and wide. And sometimes those messages can get confusing because there's so many voices in our head, and that can become a source of external interference. The best way to arm yourself to be patient and resilient when it comes to interference is to clear the clutter at the very start of your day. How many of you, for those of you who have your cameras on, have a consistent morning routine, by show of hands, that sets you up for success every day? Okay, good. Like to see hands up. All right, it's very, very important. And if you've read any books about high-performing individuals in business or athletics, they consistently have a routine that jumpstarts them mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually into their day. It's something that they do without fail. For example, Tony Robbins, in every home that he owns around the globe, has an ice cold plunge pool. And the first thing that he does when he gets out of bed is he jumps into that ice cold water. That's a pretty tough routine. I couldn't do that. Okay, so I want you to think about 2 specific strategies that you can apply that will get you set to control the things that you can control by simply separating yourself from potential mental clutter, okay? So strategy number 1 is to conduct a brain dump. And some of you may be doing this already, but you've likely heard about this. It's the first step to decluttering your mind of everything that has absolutely nothing to do with your business, right? So before you head to the office, even if it's a virtual office, it's important that you download mentally everything that has nothing to do with what you need to be focused on for your day in business and put it in a safe place. Some people will log it in their phone. They'll leave themselves voice messages. Some people will actually write it down on a notepad, put it in their computer, just put it in a place that's safe. But by literally downloading all of that potential clutter, because it's not relevant to your business, you free your mind to focus on the things that are relevant. You free yourself to be able to be fully present and excellent at what you're doing without a split focus. How many times have you, again, those of you who golf, been on the golf course and been thinking, oh, I got to remember to do that when I'm done? Or you're in the middle of a task at the office and you're like a little squirrel and your brain jets off, oh, I got to remember to do that. Or you stop what you're doing and you go write an email. Instead of compartmentalizing and putting nice, healthy boundaries around your work activities so that you can focus on the controllables and not get sucked in to the things that really aren't relevant in the moment. So by logging this information outside your head, you're going to be able to pick up right where you left off, knowing that the world is not going to crumble just because you set it aside and gave yourself permission to focus 100% of your attention on where it needs to be. So it could be remembering to put the wet clothes in the dryer when you get home, or picking up something at the grocery store, or filling up the car with gas. By completing this first step before you head to the office, you're going to give yourself permission to invest fully in your work without unnecessary distractions. And when you get off work, pick it right back up where you left off, and then give 100% of your attention to that next item. The second strategy is to identify your one thing. And I don't know if you all are already in the practice of doing this, but this was something that my business coach really instilled in me. So once you've cleared all the irrelevant clutter in your mind, your next step is to pinpoint at least one thing that you can commit to take action on that you know could help you move your business one step closer to that desired finish line. Okay, and we're not looking for some unwieldy task, but something that's very simple, that's going to give you a burst of motivation when you successfully complete it within your day. So by identifying your one thing, you're basically preparing your mind to engage in a specific action step that you can control and that you know could help you operate more confidently, perhaps more strategically, or more effortlessly. So keep in mind that there are 3 guidelines when selecting your one thing. The one thing needs to be simple, not complicated, not multiple steps, literally one thing. You need to keep it positive. Consider what you think you could do better rather than thinking about anything that you would like to avoid doing, okay? That you messed up in the past, right? So let's keep it positive. The focus needs to be on something that's going to add to your business, and make sure that you keep it doable. So select one thing, as I mentioned, that you could easily complete today instead of something that would require several days to complete. So just because you have one thing doesn't mean that's the only thing you're going to accomplish in your day, but it is going to give you a sense of purpose with which to start your day. You've probably read the book, Eat the Frog, similar concept. Okay, so your one thing is an action step that is going to be meaningful for you. The more you get into the habit of starting your day with that meaningful action and the reward of completing it and succeeding, the better your days are going to flow from one to the next. The better you're going to be bringing your best to every task by cultivating that great habit. Pillar number 4 is about maintaining unshakable confidence. Okay. There are many misconceptions when it comes to confidence. I work with a lot of golfers who wait until they start hitting good shots before they decide that they can be confident about that round and about what they can accomplish that day. But there are 2 big problems with that approach. Number 1, confidence is a belief and a choice. It is not a feeling. Okay, confidence is a choice, not a feeling. Number 2, to confidently perform, even in business, you must first believe that you can confidently perform well. So it's kind of the chicken and the egg here. And secondly, approach every situation with 100% confidence in yourself and your ability, right? So we don't wait until we succeed to then decide, oh, I can feel confident now. Phew. Okay, you've got to look at how far have I come so far? What have I learned so far? What have been my wins up to this point that I can confidently stand on that support me believing in myself to take this next step? That's how you have to approach confidence. Otherwise, you're taking that backwards approach. So just to give you an example, prior to 1954, people believed that there was absolutely no way that a person could run a mile in less than 4 minutes. You probably know this story. While many runners at the time were getting very close to crossing over that barrier, finishing 2 to 3 seconds and even just 1 second over that 4-minute mark, the conclusion was that it was physiologically impossible to go faster. That was until Roger Bannister came along. He thought about the challenge differently. He believed that it was possible under the right conditions to actually break the 4-minute mark. And because he believed it was possible, he did. While at the time, Bannister's accomplishment was big, Within a year, more than a dozen more runners completed that mile in less than 4 minutes too. So this breakthrough for Bannister and the others who followed him wasn't the result of training harder, doing anything different, wearing more, aerodynamic clothing or faster shoes. It demonstrates the impact your belief about what's possible can have on your performance. They simply changed their perspective of the challenge. So when you face a challenge in business, you've got to ask yourself, am I making this larger than life in my head, or is there a way for me to step back, set my emotions about the situation aside, look at it practically, and bring it down to size in my mind? Because we know that research indicates that the biggest distinguishing and consistent factor that separates highly successful from less than successful people is confidence. It's that critical. So confidence is a belief that you can successfully perform a desired behavior. It's an overall belief in yourself and your ability to deliver the talent you've worked hard to develop, right? You've studied hard, you've read books, you've invested time building your business. There's a tremendous amount of value that you need to use to believe in yourself and what you're capable of doing. So as you learned in Pillar 2, the critic's voice of your inner coach is what's going to move you away from success. That negative inner coach conversation drives perfectionism, comparison thinking, replaying past poor experiences on a loop, limiting beliefs, self-doubt, and anxiety. Okay? Those are confidence killers. So none of those are good things. All of those need to be eliminated from your business. To make confidence a constant in your game, you've got to think and act like a confident entrepreneur. And some of the most confident entrepreneurs in history have always thought about themselves in a positive light. They're always focused on what they can do rather than what they can't or haven't yet done. They never give up. They pursue thinking from that positive inner coach mindset. They imagine success in everything they do. If you guys are not using your imagination to imagine a successful sales call, or imagine getting up before an audience to do a presentation, or imagining that you are speaking to your ideal customer, you're not using your imagination, and it's a fabulous inner tool. Okay, so imagine your success in everything you do. And confident entrepreneurs focus on mastering tasks rather than worrying about how to avoid failure. So how do you stack up? I want you to think about that. If your confidence could use some work, if you know that, if you own that, fine. There's a simple thing you can do, and it takes just less than 5 minutes a day. 2 strategies I want to give you. The first strategy may sound a little silly, but bear with me, okay? Is to practice acting confidently. And this requires you to actually stand in front of a mirror and look at yourself, okay? So ideally, you're going to stand in front of a mirror, a full-length mirror, so you can see all of yourself and not just like a little tiny, makeup mirror. And you want to do this at the start of your day, okay? So before you practice this strategy, you're going to need to do a little homework. And I want you to spend 5 minutes writing down a list of the visible behaviors, okay, so outward behaviors, you think you physically demonstrate when you're acting confidently, okay? So what do you physically look like? What are you doing when you're acting confidently? For example, head is up, eyes are forward, shoulders are back, you're smiling, you're breathing nice and easy, okay? You might have a wide stance. If you're standing, hands on hips, you're taking up more space, right? So make a list of at least 5 physical signs of confidence that you believe you exude when you're acting confidently at work. And once you have your list, then I want you to spend 5 minutes in the morning standing in front of a full-length mirror, ideally, so that you can practice those behaviors while you watch yourself doing it. I know it sounds strange, but there is a lot of budding research that's being done on the power of body language. and how it causes chemical changes in your brain, and you start producing the endorphins that lead you to feel very powerful as an individual. Okay, so whenever you're feeling down, the last thing you want to do is get smaller. When you're feeling less confident, you don't want to cross your legs, cross your arms, do anything like this. You want to be taking up more space. Okay, it's going to change how you think and how you feel. So that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is to practice preparing confidently. So the great golfer Jack Nicklaus said, as long as I'm prepared, I always expect to win. This strategy incorporates planning for contingencies. Very, very important in business. Having prepared solutions to better handle situations that have sucker punched you in the past is very empowering, right? So you can spend your 5 minutes a day thinking about how having contingency plans in place can change how you handle, how you imagine yourself handling and navigating tricky situations better. With golf, I call this exercise replacing bad with better. And so if a golfer has gone out on the course and had a super ugly hole or a super bad shot, I will say, when you get off the course, I want you to put yourself back in that moment. And in the aftermath of the shot where you got completely unraveled, I want you to think about taking a deep breath and what could you be thinking, feeling, and doing better so that you stay in a position of control rather than feeling like you've lost it. This is a similar strategy in business. So think about how having a pre-planned solution will make you feel when you need to deploy it in the future. Because just because you've had a bad experience once doesn't mean something similar is never going to happen again. Don't you want to be better prepared to handle it like a champ? The answer is yes. Okay. Think about how calm and focused you will be able to remain in the face of future adversity. Think about how much easier it will be to redirect your thoughts from the problem to the solution. And think about how stable your belief in yourself will remain because you know exactly what you need to do. It's kind of like the situation where somebody really razzes you and it's like an hour later and you think of a really catchy comeback and you're like, darn it, why didn't I think of that? So plan for contingencies, again, to boost your confidence. The goal of this strategy is to reinforce your solution-oriented thinking, which drives greater confidence in your ability to rise above any challenge and succeed. Use your imagination, which is one of your powerful inner tools, to envision how you will confidently tap into great solutions in the face of specific challenges and stay in the power seat of your business. Pillar number 5 is about developing a love affair with learning from failure. This is probably one of the more difficult of the 6 pillars, because if you're like me, I don't like to fail. It's not fun. Okay, but you need to ask yourself, how willing are you to make mistakes? Again, when I'm working with a golfer, I will ask them, when you go to the range, are you going out there to hit perfect shots, or are you okay hitting some bad ones, knowing that there's an upside to doing so? Most of them are like, no, I don't want to hit any bad shots. No, because that's not what I want to do on the course. And that's a one-sided way to look at failure. The same thing happens to business owners. So your willingness to experience failure, if it's low, you need to make a point to change that so that you can actually be in a position to succeed more often. The big upside to giving yourself permission to fail and learn how to embrace failure is that it results in a great attitude when you do so. The upside of using failure as a launch pad is that you will achieve future success. So the secret to positioning yourself for future success is to change your perspective and reaction to failure by choosing to learn as much as you can from it when it happens. I'm going to totally date myself, but when I was a little tiny embryo, there was a company that made an electric razor called the Remington razor, and they had a commercial with a Santa on the razor going through the snow. Anyway, the owner of that company had a great saying, and I use it all the time. Even when I fall flat on my face, I'm still moving forward. That's how we embrace failure, is by looking at it in that light. Nelson Mandela said, I never lose. I either win or I learn. Hopefully you guys all know and embrace that quote. But does that really sum up your approach to business? I want you to consider that. The truth is that you only lose when you don't take the time to draw value from failure. Failing is a natural part of life and business. In her 2008 commencement address to Harvard grads, J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter series, said, quote, "It is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default. Failure taught me things about myself that I could have learned no other way. The knowledge that you have emerged wiser and stronger from setbacks means that you are ever after secure in your ability to survive." Okay, and I would end that with your ability to thrive. Because life and business is not about merely surviving. You want to be in a position by way of your mindset and the consistency of it that you are always in a position to thrive. And there's a big difference. So there is no way to completely avoid failure. Okay, it's always going to happen from time to time. And the harder you try to avoid messing up, the more you're going to get in your own way and end up messing things up. History shows us that people who choose to thrive in response to failure accelerate their progress towards their goals, and so can you. The one thing that countless others who have endured failure and come out the other side successfully have demonstrated is a great degree of bounce back ability. I recently did a podcast on this for golfers. My golf podcast, for anybody who's interested, is called She Talks Birdie. You can find that on iTunes. But I did an episode all about this concept of bounce back ability. And I used a story of a famous tiger. And everybody assumed at the beginning that I was going to talk about Tiger Woods. Well, I talked about Tigger, Winnie the Pooh's friend, because of his resilience. So resilience is the mental ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. Okay, so the mental ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune and change. How resilient are you? Like any other skill set, your resilience is something that you can work on. It can be improved, but only if you take the time to change your relationship with failure. And so I want to give you one strategy for this pillar that can make a difference. You can change your perspective of failure by looking at the upside of it. There are five upsides to failure that can actually enhance your approach to business. So number one, failure is a great teacher. My dad has always said that the biggest lessons that he's learned or the most valuable have been the ones that have cost him the most money. I have to agree with that. That has happened in my own business, right? But we learn some of the hardest lessons with the biggest consequences. That's a good thing. Then we're not likely to repeat them. So setbacks and disappointments force you to rethink your approach to situations. It opens your eyes to ways you can pivot or try something new to achieve a better outcome in the future. The second thing is that failure keeps you humble and hungry. You never want to get cocky, right? There's a difference between being overconfident and consistently confident. So if every success came with ease, you wouldn't be very motivated to keep reaching for more. By periodically getting knocked out of the complacency of your comfort zone by failure, you can choose to let it energize and push you to reach for the next level in your business. Number three, failure equips you to push past your fear. Fear is only lack of information. Okay, that's all it is. Got a question in your head that needs an answer. So when the worst thing that you can imagine happens and you're still standing, that's a win. Fear is something that you can neutralize. When you get to the other side of a mistake, you know yourself better than you did before, but only if that's the lenses that you're wearing at that time. when you allow the scholar's voice of your inner caddy to examine the situation emotionally rather than the critic inflaming your emotions, that increases your knowledge and will help you keep fear at bay in the future. Number 4, failure can motivate you to set meaningful goals. Okay, the best way to make yourself vulnerable to mistakes is to take a fly by the seat of your pants approach to your business. Not good, right? The hoping and praying method doesn't work ever. So failure can give you that push that you need to see the necessity of having a plan, those incremental baby steps that get you systematically from where you are to where you want to be. And lastly, failure can supercharge your creativity. And I'm going to talk about creativity in our final pillar here in just a moment. But if you found yourself in a perpetual struggle with a particular task in your business, the fastest way to move through it is to have your creativity sparked. Failure can open your eyes to alternative options to succeed that you might not have otherwise seen. And so that is the final upside to it. So in order for you to tap into all 5 of those benefits, you've got to first acknowledge the fact that you're going to learn more from failure than success. That's a hard one to swallow, but I really want you to embrace that. You're going to learn more from failure than you ever will from success. So learn to love it, not the sting of it, but what you can draw from the experience and you're going to use to leverage and empower your business. Pillar number 6 is about setting a winning game plan. So playing to win is never about the results alone. Okay, that's the cherry on top of the sundae, but it's really not the sundae. Nick Saban, coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, said, the more one emphasizes winning, meaning fixating on the results alone, the less he or she is able to concentrate on what actually causes success. In this final pillar, I want to share a process you can use to create a play-to-win game plan that will enable you to deliver your A game every day. And every day we wake up with a new version of our A game. It's never the same. Only rigid thinkers expect that. All right. So think for a moment about how you define your wins in business currently, right? Is a win landing a new client? Is a win having a really successfully big launch? Is a win getting a ton of likes or shares on a blog post or a YouTube video? Is a win doubling your email subscribers? If you answered yes to any of those questions or you're thinking along those lines, how often are you consistently winning? There's more to winning. What I'm trying to illustrate here is there's more to winning than just those finish line metrics. So if that's how you're measuring it, if that's kind of the narrow view that you have of success and winning, then you're probably not winning very often. And I'd like to change that for you in your business. As you've been learning in the prior pillars, winning is the result of being invested in the process that contributes to great results, but not the results themselves. To leverage the power of your business A game, you've got to have a winning game plan. And a winning game plan is driven by how well you think like a winner. And there's a big difference between being a good thinker and being an outstanding thinker. And because you all are UVA graduates, you should be in a position, you should have been motivated to go well beyond the norm, well beyond average, and to be reaching for the ability to be an exceptional thinker with a winning mindset. So an entrepreneur who consistently thinks like a winner focuses on what's working and doubles down to do more of that over worrying about what's not working. One of my business mentors right now repeats constantly, do more of what's working and less of what's not. Do more of what's working and less of what's not. You want to build your game plan around that mantra. That mindset allows you to approach every situation with a belief that you always have enough of what you need to succeed, whatever that next task might be. And the key to maintaining this particular mindset, no matter how you might get tested on a daily basis, is with 3 essential characteristics. Those are flexibility, creativity, and positivity. are those things that you're being mindful of living out, bringing to your business activities every single day? Flexibility, creativity, and positivity. Flexibility is the most important of the three because it really makes way for the other two. An entrepreneur set on taking a rigid approach to his or her business sets him or herself up to fail, because business isn't rigid. Business isn't that predictable. There are a lot of unknowns. Your business is never going to be perfect. That's an absolute guarantee. The challenges you face will never be the same day in and day out. That's another guarantee. Your days will unfold differently, and you have to make a point to be ready to adjust easily and pivot when you need to. The second one, creativity, is a strength that you want to continually cultivate. It is something that actually helps you change things up and take a playful approach to business. For those of you who have ever been involved in a sport, what's the ultimate goal, right? Everybody wants to get into the zone. Well, research shows that kids who are engaged in play are experiencing a lot of the characteristics that elite athletes experience and describe when they're in the zone. And so, as part of good business practice, you never want to take yourself too seriously. You want to make sure that you stay creative because you stay playful. You can think outside the box and you're okay with that. You're okay with being a little unconventional. If we've learned anything over the last, 12 to 18 months, I hope we've learned that. So creativity is essential for a winning game plan because you will always face new challenges and new scenarios you need to navigate. It expands the number of options that you see available to you every time a challenge comes your way. So taking a consistently creative approach is going to keep your mind sharp and help you tap into your best skills. My final point is the necessity for positivity as an essential characteristic so that you can operate with a winning game plan. It's important to head into every single situation with a positive focus to keep your thoughts on the right things, the things that matter when it comes to business success. A positive approach is possible when you make sure that you allow your scholarly inner coach to call the shots. We've talked about that already, and focus on learning from disappointments and failure, which we've also talked about, in order for you to continue to build momentum. The moment you allow negativity to take over, you draw your power away from your higher processing center in your brain. Why? Because you kind of regress to your emotional processing center, okay? So we need to make sure that we stay objective by staying positive. Choosing to approach every day with more flexibility, creativity, and positivity will position you to tap into your best on any given day. Will that make every day as easy as pie? Absolutely not. I'm not making that promise. But when you really commit to investing your time, energy, and effort into making these non-negotiable actions in your business, they're going to put you in a position to get the very best out of what you have to work with, that version of your A game that day. They produce the right kind of thinking that can cumulatively lead to the outcomes you desire. So my call to action for you this evening is I challenge you to select one pillar and one action step. Think about them, think about prioritizing them in your mind. So based on what you learned today, hopefully you have an idea of where you might need to start cultivating a little bit of a better mindset in your business. So I'd like you to focus on one pillar and one action from that pillar and start there. We know from research that it takes anywhere from 30 to 90 days or more in order to build new habits through consistent action. And so that's why we want to start small and be consistent and successful with one thing first. Once you feel like you've achieved some type of transformation, some type of positive benefit from applying that action step consistently, and you feel like that's starting to solidify into a new habit for you, then pick something else to tackle as you go. But don't try to do all the things all at once or you'll end up failing, because we can really only focus well on one task at a time. This whole idea of multitasking doesn't work. Hopefully you guys know that. So it's really just that simple. Pick one thing, get really good at that one thing, then move to the next new one thing. To quickly recap before we open things up to your questions, in this seminar, you learned about the 6 pillars of a winning entrepreneurial mindset. And I hope you have a lot of great takeaways from the things that I shared. So those 6 pillars, again, are operating with healthy expectations by focusing on the things that really matter in business. Number 2, listening to a positive inner coach, because allowing your thoughts to go rogue and go negative does nothing but subtract from your business. Number 3, focusing on the controllables, because there are plenty of things in business and in life that we have absolutely no control over. So why waste time, effort, and energy on them when there are much better things that you can invest in, that you can do something you can use to actually move that performance needle in your business. Number 4, maintaining unshakable confidence, which is absolutely possible when you make the decision to think about yourself and your ability and your business in one way. And it's not about lying to yourself, right? I'm not asking you to tell yourself falsehoods. I'm asking you to focus on how you've been winning and build your belief on that information alone. Number 5, developing a love affair with learning from failure. And I gave you 5 benefits, 5 upsides to embracing failure. So hopefully you're going to begin to allow your perspective of that to evolve beyond the ugliness of the initial sting and really see the silver lining that comes with it. And then lastly, setting a winning game plan by approaching your business purposefully with, do we remember what they are? Flexibility, creativity, and positivity. And I'd love to know, as we move into our Q&A section in a minute, which element of what you learned from the 6 pillars was your biggest takeaway this evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannon. That was so great. And I feel like we just like scratched the surface. Well, I have a couple questions, but I would love for other people that have questions to, you feel free to unmute yourself and ask them live, or you can drop them into the chat and Anthony and I will ask them out loud. And also any takeaways, like major takeaways that anyone wants to share. Would also love to hear those. Well, I have a question, so I'll start it out. So I'm curious about like what you do when sort of nothing's happening, in the sense of like, I'm sure that you have the situation with athletes, right, where they feel like they've hit a plateau, right? And they're like continuing to do the same thing. And it's like, this happens, I feel like, a lot in business, where you're like, well, I'm trying to do the same thing and I can't, and then you get into a mental rut, right? And then it's like it's very hard to shake yourself out of it sometimes, like speaking from my experience, especially when you're alone, as a lot of us are a lot of the time. So what have you seen from your experience, perhaps with athletes or just people in general, about how to get yourself past those moments that can be really hard and last for a long time?
Right. It's a great question, Allison. So it happens a lot with golfers. It happens a lot, I think, in business. I know I've experienced this plateau, let me put it this way, what feels like a plateau. But I think what we lose sight of, again, when we're just focused on those big finishes, right? Those big needle movers, we can lose sight of all the things that are happening behind the scenes, okay? As with anything in life, there are no overnight success stories. And so what I would challenge you to do is to not only look for, but track the mini wins that are occurring. If you're not journaling, you guys need to be journaling, and you need to be writing down what these little micro wins are that are happening behind the scenes that might not have any big impact. For example, with a golfer, they might have spent like the last 30 days really working on one aspect of their mental game, but they haven't seen it translate to a better score, right? Their score is not coming down yet. But what they do know is that they're focusing better, or they're not as afraid of their, nemesis or blow up holes on the golf course. In business, it's very similar. And you've got to make sure that you're not just looking so far ahead at the chasm between where you are and where you want to be, that you're not seeing those incremental improvements that are happening behind the scenes and that are building up to that next breakthrough for you, whatever that looks like in your business.
Mhm.
We can't think about business success as being, this steep climb, right? So often from the outside, it looks like boop, and then boop, and then right? But this is where you're in a growth phase. And that's how I want you to see it. There's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, building for the next boop. And then we go into another growth phase. Do not be disheartened by growth phases.
Mhm.
They often come with growing pains, but that's okay too. You've got to know that you're making progress when those indicators are in play.
Yeah, those are great points. Thank you so much. I like the idea of the growth phase. That's a great term, I think, too, to think about it, like what we're going through in those moments. I also had a question. I mean, anyone else, feel free to ask questions, but
There's a question in the chat.
oh, okay.
So Jacqueline asked, how do you separate wins for workable failures when there's so much clutter in your brain?
Okay, can we expand on that question? What are you constituting as a workable failure?
Well, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I like the idea of journaling small wins. And I think what basically I was saying, you answered my question, because I was thinking, how do I separate my small wins from, say I failed at something and I realized, oh my God, I can improve on that. So that's a workable failure, right?
Well, that's actually a win. Okay.
That's a win. Right.
If you failed, but you gained something of value from the failure that makes you a better, smarter, more strategic, more confident entrepreneur, that still falls into the win category.
Right. Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Great question.
Oh, so Phyllis also asked, this is a great question. So many of us are relying on our computers. How do you best handle social media distractions or all computer source distractions, email, text, alerts? It's more of like a, kind of a tactical question, but I think that a lot of us do have this, and I probably extends to like everyone. It's like really hard to sometimes, I think, to work deeply and in a concentrated way because we have so many distractions. Shannon, do you have any advice to share on that from your experience?
Just in general, from a focus standpoint, it's a great question. I struggle from shiny object syndrome, and I'm a squirrel, right? So it's just part of my personality, and I have to really work hard against that tide. So when it comes to focus, we all need to recognize what our limitations are, what our boundaries are for good focus. And there is always a point that we can reach if we're trying to focus intently for too lengthy of a period of time, where we start to get a diminishing return on our investment. If you've ever tried to meditate for the first time, your mind can just wander all over the place within seconds. And you're like, gosh, why is this so hard? Well, again, it's a discipline. So what I would recommend is you got to set healthy boundaries. And so that means, opening up, perhaps I'm on a Mac, so a Pages document or a Word document, and shutting down everything else, turning off all notifications. You can't have these ones ghosting across your screen and stuff like that. Can't have things pinging. With my golf clients, they have to turn their phone off and stick it in the golf bag. They can't have it on them when they're playing. That just opens you up to distractions. So don't feed the beast, so to speak, but really focus on setting good, healthy boundaries. With that, set a timer. I mean, how many experts around productivity have talked about setting a timer and giving yourself, if you know that your capacity right now is to focus really, really well and be productive for 10 minutes, set a timer for 10 minutes, having shut everything else down. And as soon as that timer goes off, get up, get the blood flowing, go get a drink of water. It's always good to hydrate. Do something different, and then come back, set the timer again, just a mini break. Don't go spend an hour catching up on Netflix, but, set those healthy boundaries so that you are being very quality driven and productive in shorter bursts. It's like in the gym, interval training. same sort of concept, but with your brain.
Yeah, healthy
hopefully
boundaries.
that helped.
That's turning off your phone. That's a good one, I think, in general. Okay, so a few more questions coming in the chat. So another question from Phyllis, and actually, kind of is James had a question which kind of relates, so I'll kind of ask them both at once. So Phyllis was curious if you have found any cultural, what she calls cultural conflicts with how a person can express confidence. So in an international setting, or you're male versus female, like making strong eye contact or not, like how does that play into how you express confidence? And should we be conscious of that? And James also mentions like sometimes deference is useful when talking to sales leads, investors, et cetera, which is a good point on psychology, right? Are there tactics to maintaining valuable confidence while also exhibiting deference? So kind of a couple of nuances on that, like how to practice confidence strategy.
Certainly. So two different things here. Obviously, cultural differences. If you know that you're going to conduct business in a culture that is very different from the one that you're familiar with, educate yourself before you go. I don't think it means taking a less confident approach from an internal standpoint, but respecting cultural communication like body language and those types of cues. I think that's just preparing yourself, preparing for that contingency ahead of time, so that you again can take a confident approach to that meeting or to that that situation. As far as the question, if I understand it correctly, again, what I'm talking about is it's an internal perspective of yourself. It's not always a blatantly obvious external. For example, with my golfers, I want to know that when they have executed a shot that they expected to execute, that they visually planned for and rehearsed, etc., that when they get what they set out to do, that they're celebrating, that they're owning that as a win. But it doesn't mean that they're being super flamboyant outside to everybody around them, but that they're having a party on the inside, right? So confidence can be similarly maintained. But I think, James, if I understand correctly, you're speaking more, I think, in terms of just mutual respect. And please clarify if I'm missing the point here. But what I want everybody to take away is that when we're talking about unshakable confidence, it's really a perspective that you are maintaining and not allowing to be flapped by anything that happens around you. I don't know if I answered that question.
I think so. Thank you. So another question from Diana: what resources do you suggest for continued study in performance and sports psychology?
Diana, specifically a winning mindset, or like, educationally learning about sports psychology?
I would say I'm happy to hear more about your version, and also just looking for other resources, books, podcasts, websites, communities, things like that.
Let's see. But again, specific to the educational side of sports psychology or the practical side of sports psychology?
Sorry, I guess I don't know enough about the difference, but I'm looking to use this. I have a performance consulting firm. So, and I usually do it in organizational performance, but I'm really curious in using more of this sports side of things as analogous to our clients and what we're doing.
Okay, so any books, I think I have it now. So any books that have been written by or written about elite athletes. The one that comes to mind, which I absolutely love and recommend to my clients all the time, is Michael Phelps' book that takes you up to his, I think, the 2008 games. I'm drawing a blank now. Shoot. I can, do you want me just to come up with some suggestions? And
that would be great. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, sorry, I'm like totally having a brain.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, if you, I can always email everyone later, Shannon. So if you have any that you recommend generally and you have a list or something, I'll send that to everyone. So yeah. No,
Will
that's
do. There's so many out there and I'm just kind of like, "Oh," right now. But
Thank
you know,
you.
there's so many great stories about athletic success and the journey that they went through on the mental side. And so tons of resources that I can send your way as well. I mean, definitely digest all of the amazing business performance, mindset driven business performance books out there. I think of, everything that's ever been written by John Maxwell is great. So yeah, I can put together a list of my favorites for you guys.
perfect. We have another question from David. Do you have any advice on how to avoid the traps of perfectionism when pursuing excellence daily?
Great question. I've been talking to my clients about this lately. All right, so first of all, David, you need to understand that there is a big difference between perfectionism and excellence. And I think that for most people who think that perfectionism is an okay standard, that they blur the lines between the two. Perfectionism sets you up to fail because as a human being, you are not, infallible. You have flaws. Okay. So to set the bar at that level for yourself basically puts you in a position to consistently fail. Standards of excellence are within your capability. It's not that you can't, I'm not asking you to lower your standards. I'm just asking you not to set them at perfect because that's unattainable. So just below that in terms of, and when you can think in terms of, I can see how I can get to that level practically, that's a great standard of excellence. And also a great standard of excellence is one that's going to take a lot of effort on your part to hold your feet to the fire to do it. Mm-hmm. Right? It needs to excite you. It needs to continue to stretch you, but it's not the same thing as being perfect. So do not wear perfectionism as a badge of honor. That's a no-no.
Yeah, I was going to say this kind of goes back to the winning game plan, I think, pillar, right? Like if you set that standard and you have a plan for it, then you can avoid maybe indulging in or falling into the trap of thinking, well, I have to be perfect in everything I do, which is another way that you can take all your mental energy that's not going to be productive, right?
Right. And do you remember me saying that when your outlook is driven towards perfection, then good is never good enough. Mm-hmm. So at what point then can you say that you're actually winning if it's not achieving a state of perfection? Right. So what's the opposite? You're failing. Mm-hmm. You're always coming up short. That is a very debilitating way to perform.
Yeah, very true. Very, very profound. I know we're kind of getting to the end of our time. This has been great. Love everyone's questions. If anyone has one more question, we can certainly pose it to Shannon.
And thank you for those of you who put in number 5.
Oh yeah. Anyone else have any pillars that they want to add?
Where's your favorite?
Really?
2 number 5s in there.
Yeah, a couple of 5s. Love affair with failure. I like that one.
Dr. Reece, I'll ask you a question here.
Just call me Shannon. Just call me Shannon.
Shannon, appreciate your time. Learned a lot of golden nuggets in here for sure. One of the things I'm thinking about is great. Some takeaways. I'm going to start to employ them. And, as you said, 30, 60, 90 days to really create that habit. How do we go back in 30, 60, 90 days and reevaluate and ensure that in creating one habit, we haven't created another one that is bad? And I say that because I'm sure with your golfers that you work with, right? You work on this mechanism in your swing, and then all of a sudden you're doing something else really badly. And it kind of, maybe that's how you end up in that plateau phase. So what do we do to address that in 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it might be?
I think it's a great question. As far as self-evaluation, I think it's good to set, deadlines for when you're going to do that. With my golf clients, they have accountability evaluations that I have them complete every week. And it focuses on getting them to essentially grade themselves on process-oriented elements of their game. So we don't talk about scores, we don't talk about their statistics, we look at what they're doing well within the process and what still needs attention. And so from a business standpoint, I would recommend that you decide, I'm going to check in with myself at the end of every week, or I'm going to check in with myself at the end of 30 days and see if what I set out to do actually led me in the direction that I want to go. So now we're talking about goal mapping. So not goal setting, but having objectives in place that you are in pursuit of, and you're in pursuit of them by taking actionable steps on a specific timeline with specific measurables in place to know that you're moving in the right direction. So I would say that we're not going to focus on necessarily how I failed in the last 30 days. Where have I succeeded in the last 30 days, and what are my next opportunity areas? So based on my 30,000 foot view and evaluation of how I did within an encapsulated period of time, where did I win? Where did I learn? And how does that help then shape my action steps for the coming month? Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely something to evaluate, and certainly I think plays into pillar number 6, which I think might be my favorite. So
okay, cool.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, this time has really flown, but thank you everyone for your enthusiastic participation and questions. And of course, thank you, Shannon, so much for your time and for sharing your expertise and your experience with both business and athletes. It was super interesting, super helpful, lots of gold nuggets. Certainly. So yeah, thank you everyone so much for coming. We'll have the recording link in a few weeks. We'll send that out to everyone so you can catch anything that you missed. And stay tuned for more programming coming up from Who's in Entrepreneurship. We look forward to seeing you all at the next one. And yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you all for coming.